The sun was just beginning to rise over the wide open land when the cowboy rode alone across the plains. The morning air was cool, and a soft wind moved through the tall grass like quiet waves. His horse walked at an easy pace, familiar with this land as much as he was. This was his daily routine: checking fences, watching cattle, and making sure nothing strange had happened overnight. Life out here was usually simple and predictable. But that morning, something felt different. As he rode closer to a dry creek bed, his horse suddenly slowed and snorted. The animal's ears stood straight up, alert. The cowboy looked down and noticed marks on the ground, broken branches, disturbed dirt, and faint footprints. These were not from animals. He slid down from his horse and knelt to look more closely. The tracks were light but uneven, as if someone had been struggling to walk. His heart tightened. Out here, signs like this often meant trouble. He followed the trail carefully, moving slowly so he wouldn't scare anyone or anything nearby. The tracks led toward the rocks near the creek bed. As he stepped closer, he heard a faint sound, a sharp breath, quick and shallow. He froze and listened again. It was human. Then he saw her. She was lying partly hidden between two large rocks, her dark hair spread across the dusty ground. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and her face was pale with pain and fear. One of her ankles was swollen badly, and dried blood stained the cloth around it. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't eaten or slept in days. The cowboy stood still, not wanting to frighten her. But it was already too late. Her eyes opened suddenly and locked onto him. Fear flashed across her face. She tried to move backward, dragging herself across the dirt, but the pain was too much. She let out a quiet cry and pressed her back against the rock. She was Apache. He could tell by her features, her clothing, and the symbols sewn into the fabric. Years of stories and conflict lived in that single moment between them. To her, a white man finding her alone and injured could only mean one thing. Her breathing became faster. Her hands shook as she searched the ground beside her. Maybe for a stone, maybe for a weapon, but there was nothing. She had grown up hearing stories of what happened to women captured alone. She had seen it herself. Kindness was rare. Mercy was never promised. The cowboy slowly raised his hands, showing he carried no weapon. He gently stepped back, giving her space. He spoke softly, though he knew she might not understand his words. "It's all right," he said quietly. "I'm not here to hurt you." She didn't believe him. Her eyes stayed wide, watching every movement he made. She was ready for pain, for control, for everything she had been taught to expect. But the cowboy did not move closer. Instead, he slowly removed his hat and held it against his chest for a moment, a sign of respect he had learned long ago. Then he knelt down several feet away, keeping his distance. He reached for his water canteen, took a small sip himself, and then gently placed it on the ground between them. He rolled it slowly toward her and pushed it no farther. She stared at it like it was a trick. Minutes passed. The sun climbed higher. The silence stretched between them, heavy and tense. Finally, her thirst won. With shaking hands, she reached out and pulled the canteen closer. She sniffed it first, then took a small sip. Nothing happened. She drank again. More this time. The cowboy watched quietly, relief flickering in his eyes. When she finished, she looked at him again. Confused. This was not how she expected this to go. He pointed gently at her ankle, his expression serious. He could see the swelling was bad. If it wasn't treated, it could turn dangerous. He slowly took a small cloth from his saddlebag and dipped it in the remaining water. Holding it up, he waited, asking, with his eyes. She hesitated. Every part of her wanted to refuse. But the pain was burning now, sharp and deep. Slowly, she nodded once. He moved carefully, never rushing, stopping if she flinched. He cleaned the wound as gently as he could, tying the cloth around it to give some support. His hands were rough from years of work, but his touch was careful. When he was done, he leaned back again, giving her space. He stood, walked back to his horse, and led it closer but not too close. Then he pointed toward the ranch, far off in the distance. The small house could barely be seen against the horizon. He pointed to himself, then to the ranch, then back to her. It was not a command. It was an offer. She understood enough to know what he meant. Go with him. Shelter. Safety. Or at least, that's what he was offering. Her chest tightened. This was the moment she feared most. If she agreed, she might be walking into captivity. If she refused, she might not survive. The night. She looked at the open land around her. No people, no help, just pain and weakness. She looked back at the cowboy. He was waiting, patient, not reaching for her, not forcing her. Slowly, painfully, she tried to stand. Her leg nearly gave out. Instantly, he stepped forward, but stopped again when she stiffened. Instead, he knelt and lowered his shoulder slightly, offering support without touching. After a long moment, she leaned against him. The contact was brief, but heavy with meaning. He helped her onto the horse carefully, making sure she was secure and comfortable. He mounted behind her, keeping distance, holding the reins loosely. As the horse began to move, she stared ahead, her heart pounding. She expected chains, she expected commands, she expected her life to end the way so many others had. But behind her, the cowboy rode in silence, guiding the horse gently, as if carrying something fragile. As the ranch slowly came into view, she realized something unsettling. Nothing had happened the way she expected, and that scared her even more. The ride to the ranch felt much longer than it really was. The horse moved at a slow, careful pace, as if it understood the weight it carried. The woman sat stiffly in front of the cowboy, her body tense with every step. She did not relax for even a moment. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers tightly curled, ready to react if needed. She expected him to hold her tightly, to control her movements, but he didn't. His presence was steady but distant. He guided the horse with calm hands and let the silence stretch between them. No sharp words, no sudden movements. That silence made her uneasy. In her experience, silence usually meant something bad was coming. As the ranch came closer, she saw a small wooden house, a stable, and open land stretching in all directions. There were no other people in sight, no guards, no signs of a large group, just one man and his land. The horse stopped near the house. The cowboy slid down first, then slowly helped her down, careful of her injured ankle. The moment her feet touched the ground, she pulled away slightly, keeping space between them. He pointed toward the house, then opened the door and stepped aside, letting her enter first. She paused at the doorway. This was another moment where her heart beat hard against her chest. Crossing that line felt final, like stepping into a new life she didn't understand. Still, the pain in her ankle reminded her she had little choice. She stepped inside. The house was simple, clean. A small table, 2 chairs, a bed near the window, and a shelf with a few books and tools. Nothing fancy, nothing threatening. Sunlight came through the window and warmed the wooden floor. She expected him to close the door behind her and block the exit. Instead, he walked past her, opened another door that led to a small room, and pointed inside. There was a second bed, a blanket neatly folded on top, and a basin of water nearby. He pointed to her, then to the room, then back to himself and the main room. Separate spaces. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She did not understand everything, but she understood enough. He was giving her her own room. She stepped into it slowly, testing the ground beneath her feet. When she turned back, he was already walking away, giving her privacy. He did not lock the door. He didn't even close it fully. She stood there for a long time, listening. She heard him moving around the house, then outside. The sounds were normal, calm, no anger, no shouting. She sat down on the bed, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. Her ankle throbbed badly now, the swelling tight and painful. She removed the cloth he had tied and looked at the wound. It was still angry and red, but cleaner than before. Soon, he returned with a small bowl of food. He placed it on a table near her door and stepped back again. The food was simple bread, beans, and a piece of cooked meat. He pointed to it, then nodded. She waited until he stepped farther away before reaching for it. She ate slowly, carefully, watching him from the corner of her eye. He sat at the table in the main room, eating his own food, never staring, never watching too closely. The hours passed quietly. As the day faded into evening, the light in the room softened. She expected him to say something, to demand something, but he didn't. When night came, he brought a clean blanket and placed it gently at the foot of her bed. Then he nodded once and walked away. That night, she did not sleep. She lay awake, listening to every sound. The wind outside, the creak of wood, his footsteps as he moved to his own bed. At any moment, she expected the door to open. It never did. When morning came, she was surprised to find herself still there, untouched, unharmed. He was already awake, working quietly outside. She watched through the window as he repaired a fence, moving with calm focus. There was no rush in his movements, no anger in his body. Later, he brought fresh water and a clean cloth. He pointed to her ankle, then waited. She hesitated, then slowly allowed him to help again. He cleaned the wound more carefully this time and wrapped it with fresh cloth. He worked like someone used to caring for animals, gentle, patient, and focused. When he finished, he looked at her face, then pointed to his chest. "My name is Samuel," he said slowly. She didn't respond at first. Names held power. Giving one away meant trust. But after a moment, she spoke softly. "Anaya." He nodded, repeating it carefully, as if making sure he honored it. The days that followed settled into a quiet pattern. He never forced conversation. He spoke sometimes, simple words, slow and calm. She listened more than she spoke. She watched everything. He never raised his voice. He never stood too close. He never touched her unless she allowed it. Still, she waited for the change. In her world, kindness always came with a cost. One afternoon, while he worked outside, she tried the door. It opened easily. She stepped outside, leaning on a stick he had carved for her without saying a word. She walked slowly, testing her strength. He noticed but did not stop her. He simply watched from a distance. She could leave. That realization shook her more than fear ever had. Why would he let her go? That evening, he sat across from her at the table and placed something between them. A small pouch of dried food. A simple knife. Practical items. Survival items. He pointed to the door, then to the land beyond, then to her. "You choose," he said gently. Her chest tightened. This was the offer he had been making all along. Without words. Freedom. No one had ever offered her that before. She looked at the items, then at him. She searched his face for lies, for tricks. She found none. Only honesty, and maybe something else, loneliness. Her people had taught her to distrust men like him. His world had taught him to fear people like her. Yet here they were, sitting across from each other, both carrying pain. Neither fully understood. She pushed the pouch slightly back toward him. Not leaving, not yet. His eyes met hers, surprised. But he said nothing. He nodded slowly, accepting her choice without claiming it. That night, as she lay down, She realized something had shifted. She was no longer waiting for harm. She was waiting to understand, and somewhere deep inside, a fragile thread of trust began to form, thin, uncertain, but real. She still didn't know what the future held. But for the first time since she had been injured and alone on the open land, she felt something unfamiliar. Hope. The days passed slowly, marked by the rising and setting of the sun. Each morning, light spilled through the small window and warmed the wooden floor. Anaya woke to quiet sounds, the soft clink of metal tools, the low voice Samuel used when speaking to his horse, the steady rhythm of work. Nothing in this place felt rushed. Nothing felt loud. Her ankle was healing, but pain still followed her with every step. Samuel noticed this without her saying a word. One morning, he placed a sturdier walking stick near her bed, the handle smoothed carefully. He had spent time on it, she could tell. She nodded once in thanks. He smiled briefly and went back outside. They lived side by side like this, sharing space, but not pressing into each other's worlds. Anaya spent long hours sitting near the window, watching the land. She studied everything. How Samuel moved. How he worked until his hands were rough and dusty, yet his actions stayed gentle. How he spoke to his horse, as if it understood every word. How he never looked at her like she was something to be owned or feared. Still, she stayed alert. Trust did not come easily. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in from the west. Dark clouds gathered quickly, and strong wind swept across the open land. Rain began to fall hard, pounding the roof and shaking the windows. Thunder followed, loud and sharp. Anaya stiffened. Storms had always meant danger for her people, loss, chaos, and fear. She moved back from the window and sat on the edge of her bed, heart beating fast. Samuel noticed her fear immediately. He did not rush to her. He lit a small lamp and placed it in the main room, so the light filled the house. Then he sat at the table, calm and steady, letting her see there was nothing to fear here. The storm passed within an hour. That evening, while they ate in silence, Samuel reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. He placed it on the table between them. It was a carved wooden figure, simple but carefully shaped a horse. "I made it years ago," he said quietly, "when I was alone." Anaya looked at the carving. She reached out and touched it gently. The lines were worn smooth, shaped by many hours of thought. She understood without words. Loneliness speaks the same language everywhere. That night, she spoke more than she ever had before. She told him about her journey. Not every detail, but enough. About being separated from her group. About the fall that injured her ankle. About the days spent hiding, moving only when necessary, hoping someone from her people would find her. They never did. Samuel listened without interrupting. He did not ask questions. He did not judge. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "You're safe here," he said. She studied his face, searching for something false. There was nothing. As weeks passed, her strength returned. She began to help in small ways, sorting dried food, cleaning tools, feeding the horse. Samuel never asked her to work, but he didn't stop her either. He treated her help as a choice, not an expectation. That mattered. One morning, she stepped outside alone and walked farther than before. The land stretched wide and open. For the first time, she felt the pull of the horizon. Her people were somewhere beyond it. Samuel watched from a distance, saying nothing. When she returned, he was fixing a broken fence post. She stopped beside him. "My people," she said slowly, choosing each word carefully. "They may look for me." He straightened and met her gaze. "If they come," he said, "they will be welcome to talk. No fear, no challenge, just truth." That night, Anaya dreamed of her past, of laughter around fires, of songs carried by the wind. She woke with tears on her face. Samuel noticed, but did not ask. He placed a warm drink beside her and left her alone with her thoughts. Days later, strangers arrived. 3 riders appeared at the edge of the land, their shapes dark against the sky. Anaya saw them first. Her body went tense. Old fear rushed back, sharp and fast. Samuel followed her gaze. His expression changed, not to anger, but to caution. He stepped forward, placing himself where she could see him clearly. "Stay inside if you want," he said. She didn't move. The riders approached slowly. They were not from her people. Their clothes and posture told her that much. They stopped near the fence, eyes scanning the land, then the house. Samuel walked out to meet them, hands visible. They spoke for a while. Their voices were low, carried by the wind. Anaya couldn't hear the words, but she watched Samuel closely. He stood firm, calm, unmoved. The riders looked toward the house once, then again. Anaya felt exposed, like a shadow had fallen across her. Samuel noticed. He shifted his position slightly, blocking their view. After a tense moment, the riders turned and left. Only when they disappeared did Samuel return inside. "You're safe," he said again. That night, Anaya realized how close fear still lived inside her. How easily the past could rise and pull her back. She also realized something else. Samuel had chosen to protect her without hesitation. That choice weighed heavily. The next morning, she packed the small pouch of supplies he had given her before. She tied it carefully. Her heart felt heavy. Samuel watched quietly. "I should go," she said. He nodded, though something in his eyes dimmed. "You will always have a place here," he said. She stepped outside, walking slowly toward the open land. Each step felt harder than the last. She stopped, turned back. "I don't know where I belong," she admitted. Samuel took a breath. "You don't have to decide today." That simple sentence broke something inside her. She returned to the house, leaving the pouch by the door. As the sun set that evening, they sat together in silence, watching the sky change colors. 2 people from different worlds, bound not by fear or force, but by choice. Anaya knew challenges still lay ahead. Pain, questions, and hard decisions waited. But she also knew this. For the first time, she was not running. She was standing still, long enough to see what could grow. And somewhere between the quiet land and the simple house, between shared silence and unspoken care, her future was slowly taking shape. Fragile, uncertain, but no longer empty. The change came quietly, not with loud trouble, but with small signs that something was shifting. Anaya felt it before she could explain it. The land no longer felt empty. The wind carried tension instead of peace. Even the horse seemed restless, stamping its feet and lifting its head often, as if listening for something far away. Samuel felt it too. One morning, he did not go out to work right away. He stood near the door, looking toward the horizon, his face serious. Anaya watched him from the table, her fingers wrapped tightly around a cup of warm water. "Something's coming," she said softly. Samuel nodded. "I know." He didn't ask how she knew. He trusted her sense of the land, just as she had begun to trust his calm judgment. Later that day, Anaya noticed faint tracks near the outer fence. They were not fresh, but they were not old either. Her chest tightened. Tracks meant people. People meant questions, and questions often led to danger. She pointed them out to Samuel. He knelt, studied them carefully, then stood again. "2," he said. His words were calm, but Anaya saw his hand rest a little longer on the fence post. He was preparing himself, just in case. That night, sleep did not come easily. Anaya lay awake, listening to every sound. The house felt smaller than before. The walls that once brought comfort now reminded her how close danger could come. She thought of her people. If they were nearby, should she go to them? Would they understand why she stayed here? Or would they only see a man from another world and judge without listening? Her thoughts tangled until her chest felt tight. Just before dawn, she heard movement outside. Her heart jumped. She rose quietly and moved to the window. Shapes stood near the edge of the land. 3 figures. Men. They were watching the house. Fear rushed through her body like cold water. Samuel was already awake. She saw him step outside calmly, as if he had been expecting this moment. He did not carry a weapon. His hands were open, his posture steady. Anaya wanted to call out, to warn him, but something held her back. The men approached slowly. They spoke first, their voices firm but not loud. Anaya couldn't hear the words, but she watched their faces closely. Samuel answered carefully. He did not raise his voice. He did not step back. The men's eyes moved toward the house. Anaya stepped away from the window. Her mind raced. If they came inside, what would she do? Run? Hide? Stand her ground? Memories from the past pressed in on her. Moments when people had decided her fate without asking her voice. Moments when fear had taken control. She refused to let that happen again. She took a breath, steadying herself, and stepped outside. The moment the men saw her, everything changed. Their posture stiffened. Surprise crossed their faces, followed by something harder to read. Suspicion, curiosity, judgment. Anaya stood tall despite the pain that still lingered in her ankle. She did not hide behind Samuel. She stood beside him. The men spoke again, sharper now. Samuel glanced at Anaya, not to stop her, but to check if she was ready. She was. She spoke clearly, her voice steady. Even though her heart was pounding, she told them she was there by choice, that she had been injured, that Samuel had helped her without force or threat. The men exchanged looks. One of them scoffed. Another frowned. They did not believe her fully. How could they? Stories and fear shaped their thinking, just as fear had once shaped hers. Samuel spoke then, his voice firm but respectful. He said she owed him nothing, that she was free to leave at any time, that he would stand by her words. Silence followed. The wind moved through the grass. A bird cried out in the distance. Finally, one of the men shook his head. "This land isn't safe," he said. "People are moving. Trouble follows." Samuel nodded. "It always does." After another long moment, the men turned away. They did not apologize. They did not threaten. They simply left, their figures shrinking as they rode off. Only when they were gone did Anaya realize how tense her body had been. Her knees felt weak. Samuel noticed and gently guided her back inside. She sat down heavily, her hands shaking. "That was brave," he said quietly. She looked up at him, eyes shining. "I was tired of being silent." That moment changed something between them. Not into something rushed or spoken aloud, but into a deeper understanding. They were no longer just sharing space. They were standing together. In the days that followed, word seemed to travel. More riders passed at a distance. None stopped, but their presence was felt. Samuel stayed alert, and Anaya stayed close, helping where she could. One afternoon, Samuel brought out a small box from beneath his bed. He placed it on the table and opened it. Inside were papers, worn and folded. "This land," he said slowly, "was given to me after the war. I stayed away from towns to avoid trouble. I wanted peace." Anaya listened carefully. "If staying here puts you in danger," he continued, "I won't ask you to stay." She studied the papers, then his face. "And if leaving puts you in danger?" she asked. He had no answer for that. That night, Anaya made her decision. She packed again, but this time with intention, not fear. At dawn, she stepped outside, looking toward the rising sun. The land felt different now. Not empty. Not threatening. Samuel joined her quietly. "I'm going to find my people," she said. "Not because I must, but because I need to know where I come from before I decide where I'm going." He nodded slowly. "I'll walk with you. Part of the way." They traveled together for a day, then another. The land changed gradually, becoming more familiar to Anaya with each step. When they reached a place where paths crossed, they stopped. "This is far enough," she said. Samuel hesitated, then reached into his pocket and handed her the wooden horse. "So you remember," he said. She closed her fingers around it, emotion tightening her throat. "I won't forget," she replied. They stood there for a long moment, neither rushing away. Then Anaya turned and walked toward her future, carrying not fear, but strength. Samuel watched until she disappeared from sight. Both of them knew this was not an ending. It was a turning point. And whatever came next would be shaped not by the past, but by the choices they had learned to make together, even when apart. The journey back to her people took longer than Anaya expected. The land opened wide before her, familiar yet distant, like a memory she wasn't sure still belonged to her. Each step forward carried both hope and fear. She carried the small pouch of supplies, the walking stick, and the wooden horse Samuel had given her. She touched it often, especially at night, when the quiet felt too heavy. She traveled carefully, resting when her ankle ached, moving again when the pain eased. Along the way, she watched the signs of the land, the way birds lifted suddenly, the shape of clouds, the marks left on the ground. These were lessons her people had taught her long ago, lessons she thought she might never use again. On the third day, she saw smoke rising in the distance. Her heart began to beat faster. Smoke could mean many things, but she recognized this pattern. It was familiar, controlled, intentional. Her people were near. She stopped at the edge of a small rise and watched. She did not rush forward. Too much time had passed. Too much had changed. She needed to approach with care. When she finally stepped into view, voices rose in surprise. People moved quickly, some stepping forward, others holding back. Faces she remembered stared at her, unsure at first, then full of emotion. Her name was spoken softly, then louder. She was guided into the center of the camp. Elders listened as she spoke. She told them where she had been, how she had been injured, how she had survived. She spoke of Samuel not as a savior, not as a threat, but as a man who had given her a choice when she had none. Some listened quietly, others looked uneasy. The world was not kind to trust between people like them. Fear had deep roots. An elder asked her why she returned. Anaya answered honestly. "To remember who I am," she said, "and to decide who I will become." They let her stay. Days passed. She helped where she could. She listened more than she spoke. She laughed when stories were shared, and cried when memories returned. Her body healed fully, but her heart remained unsettled. At night, she looked toward the stars and wondered what Samuel was doing. If he was safe, if his land remained quiet. She missed the silence they shared, the steady calm of his presence, the way he never asked more than she was willing to give. Weeks later, news came of movement in the area. Travelers spoke of tension, of people passing through lands that once felt untouched. Change was coming, whether anyone wanted it or not. Anaya felt a familiar pull. She knew what it meant to stand between worlds now. She had done it before. She asked permission to leave again. This time, her people understood. "You walk two paths," an elder told her. "That is not weakness. That is strength." She left with blessings, not fear. The journey back felt different. When she reached the familiar crossing where she and Samuel had parted, she paused. The land felt quiet again, but not empty. She followed the path she knew by heart. As the ranch came into view, her steps slowed. Samuel was fixing the fence, just as he always did. He looked up, sensing her, before seeing her. When their eyes met, surprise crossed his face, followed by relief he did not try to hide. He set his tools down slowly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she smiled. "I came back," she said simply. He nodded, his voice steady but warm. "I hoped you would." She stayed. Not as someone rescued, not as someone owned, but as someone who chose. Life did not suddenly become easy. Challenges remained. Outsiders still passed through. Hard days still came. But they faced them together, with honesty and patience. They worked side by side, shared meals, shared silence. Over time, the land felt different again, not because it changed, but because they did. Anaya began to teach Samuel what she knew of the land. Samuel shared what he knew of the ranch. They learned each other's worlds, slowly, carefully, without trying to replace one with the other. One evening, as the sun set low and painted the sky in soft colors, they sat outside, watching the day end. Anaya held the wooden horse in her hand, then placed it between them. "This was for remembering," she said. "Now I don't need it anymore." Samuel smiled gently. "Keep it," he said. "For the days when remembering matters." She nodded. As night settled around them, Anaya realized something important. She had once expected only pain from the world. Control. Loss. Instead, she found choice. And in that choice, she found a future she could stand in with her head held high. Not bound by fear, not shaped by old stories, but built, slowly and carefully, on trust. And that was enough.